Radio Company of Business. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Welcome, Jim. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Rested after my holiday.
Wow. Where did you go, by the way? Anywhere nice?
We went to Cornwall. It was dreadful weather, but had a good time.
Yeah, well, it's a change, although the weather's the same.
It's nice to get away, isn't it? Yeah, away from
So,
all the gossip.
Yes. Well, tonight we're going to talk about season 1982-83. A very well, it's a turmoil, wasn't it? The whole season was. It was lots of departures,
Yes.
and a great massive change.
Yeah, I think this was a request from one of our listeners, one of our followers, who wanted to know a bit more about what happened in 82-83 when a lot of the good players left the club, and Bobby Gould in that summer of 83 had to rebuild the team. And I think we thought there was too much to talk about 2 seasons, so we split it into 2, and tonight talk about 82-83 and what happened, and next week we can do 83-4 and the Bobby Gould Phoenix from the Flames sort of thing.
Yet again.
Yes.
And for me, it was a huge season, because that's the year we moved from Warwick to Bubbenhall, and my dad changed pubs, and sort of ended his time as looking after the supporters group, Warwick and Leamington supporters group.
Yeah.
He just had too much to do basically in Bubbenhall with a bigger pub, and yeah, it's all change. Yes.
Well, there was a lot going on at Highfield Road as well, because for a start off, Gordon Milne, the long-serving manager who'd actually spent a season as general manager upstairs, decided to go and become manager of Leicester. So that was the first change in the summer of 82. And then there were no summer signings that summer. There was no money about. The club were seriously in debt. Jimmy Hill, having lost a lot of his own money and quite a bit of Coventry City's money in his ventures in the USA with the American Soccer League.
And I don't think the connection was paying off either, was it? Because they bought it, and it was a bit of a white elephant, wasn't it, really?
I think it was. And of course, it was the second season of the all-seater stadium, and we'd seen the attendances that first season drop dramatically, and sadly they continued to drop. And it was, I think there were a lot of reasons, really. There was a recession going on. There was I think a lot of fans had got disillusioned with the style of football under Dave Sexton. And the all-seater stadium, well, one of the big drawbacks of that was you had to book in advance. You couldn't just turn up on a Saturday afternoon, could you?
And it was, and definitely if you're an away fan, you got no chance. It was a bit of a mess, wasn't it? It was a good idea, badly conceived.
Yes.
We paid the price in attendances.
Well, that's right. And I remember vividly, after a game against Norwich. I think it was October time, when the gates were down to 8,000, and the Coventry Telegraph did an editorial about the club, which is very, very unusual for them to get involved in something like that. And the headline of the editorial was "A Vision Blurred."
Yeah.
And this was the vision, Jimmy Hill's vision, the all-seater stadium. And basically they were saying it had failed.
Yeah.
The club had to think hard about where it went.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hill was chairman, and he really had to carry the can for this demise.
He sort of rode roughshod over people, didn't he, Jimmy? If he had an idea, that was it, wasn't it? It's he just went ahead with it. He didn't seek the advice of fans. He wasn't interested. I know my dad wrote a couple of letters. I mean, behind me, for those who are watching it, I've got the Talbot shirt that they wore that season, and it's fully signed on the back by the squad at the time. And well, we can go to the first game of the season, which was incredible anyway, because of what happened. We were invited to Connection. I can only imagine my dad wrote another letter to Jimmy Hill complaining about how he's running the club. And we got invited to the Connection for the pre-match meal and everything. And of course, first game of the season, Perry Suckling came in, didn't he?
He did, yes. How old was he? 16?
16. And the announcement, we heard the announcement at the Connection that would have been Seeley was injured, because Jim Blythe had gone to Blues, hadn't he?
He had, yeah.
And my friend who's with me, Dave Morton, had been trialing at Villa, Coventry and Blues. And just in that summer, I got a phone call at the pub, because we'd all been for trials. And I got the phone call, and I thought they were going to talk to me and say, "Do you want to come along and have another trial?" And they're ringing up asking for my mate Dave, because they had no goalkeepers.
No.
And he was in Rhodes, and they never rang back again. And that morning we said, "Can you imagine, Dave? That could have been you today." But yeah, what a start to the season.
Well, but I seem to remember the attendance that day wasn't very high. I'll just check it. It was 10,304. For the opening day of the season.
So in 2 seasons, we've dropped off about 9,000 fans, haven't we? Must have been.
Yeah, we had. But you look at the side that day. We had a tremendous side. They're almost all homegrown. The side was Suckling, Danny Thomas, Harry Roberts, Steve Jacobs, Paul Dyson, Gary Gillespie, Martin Singleton, Jerry Francis, Mark Haitley, Gary Thompson, Steve Whitten. That's a fantastic team. Yeah. I think only Francis and possibly you could count Gillespie, although he arrived as a 17-year-old. They're the only two that the club had bought. They were all homegrown.
Well, I think it was because of Jerry Francis. It brought the average age up by higher than about 23. But I mean, majority of the time it was under 21, wasn't it, for most of the season?
It was, yeah. And there was a very thin squad as well, Claudio. I think I remember reading after Gary Thompson left, the first team squad went down to 14 players. And it was very, very thin. And the reserve team were forced to play trialists from local league teams, from Coventry Sporting and teams like that. It was desperate, absolutely desperate. But thankfully there weren't that many injuries, else we'd have been really struggling. As I said, there was no money, so no transfers in. But Dave Sexton was allowed to sign Jim Melrose from Leicester, but he had to let Tommy English go as in part exchange. I think it was almost a straight exchange deal. Actually, I don't think any money passed.
I think both players stopped scoring for both clubs when they transferred.
Well, Melrose had a good start. He scored a hat-trick on his home debut against Everton at home. There were some fantastic home performances in the first half of the season. They beat Everton 4-2. So Melrose got a hat-trick. They beat Luton 4-2. Dyson, Witten 2 and Thompson. They beat Man United 3-0 on Boxing Day.
Yeah.
They won 3-0 at West Ham. There were some really good home performances and no lack of goals, but it didn't seem to bring the fans back in. I think the biggest gate was probably the Man United game on Boxing Day, about 18,000.
But in fairness, it was like that throughout the whole Football League, apart from Liverpool and Man United. I mean, Newcastle were getting 15,000, I think. Sunderland were below 10,000 at one stage.
Our game at Liverpool, they were the best side in Europe, and they had 27,000 for our visit. Birmingham, we went to St Andrews. There was 11,000 there.
Yeah, it's just I think it's the whole thing with like you say, recession. Hooligans was a problem as well. Policing was a problem. The fences were up, weren't they? It wasn't a great experience. And unlike now, you've got the family experience. You didn't really have that then.
No.
A lot of young lads going on their own as well, whereas years ago they'd go with maybe the dad, or so you had somebody older there to keep them in tow, whereas it was a lot of yob culture, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, there was. I think things started to get very bad in November when we got knocked out of the League Cup at home to Burnley, who were then struggling at the bottom of the second division. I think Steve Hunt scored an early goal, but Burnley won 2-1, and there was a lot of booing, a lot of slow hand clapping. Do you remember that game?
I remember Trevor Stephen played for Burnley that day.
He did, yeah, he did.
And
I think Burnley went on. I think Burnley went on to go to the semi-finals. Actually,
yeah. Brian Laws, did he play?
He did.
And Dobson as well, good player. He used to be at Everton, wasn't he?
Yeah, he played. Trevor Stephen. I think their centre forward was Taylor. That might be the Steve Taylor who was our coach before AD. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And Mike Phelan played. He was the later Man United coach.
Yeah. And off the top of my head, was it Billy, the guy, Northern Irish player? Was he playing?
Billy.
I can't think of his name now.
I know who you mean, but I can't think of it. Billy didn't play. But you know who was in goal?
No.
Burnley, Alan Stevenson, who later worked for Coventry City.
Oh, he'd been there years, hadn't he?
He had, yeah. He worked at City under Paul Fletcher. They were big mates from Burnley.
Yeah, because I can remember football cards with Alan Stevenson on those old Tops ABC card. I definitely had one with him on it. Definitely.
Yeah.
But I do remember that night, Jim. Lots of booing, which in those days was a done thing, wasn't it? I mean, it's frowned upon now, but it's the only way you could show your disapproval that you didn't like. And it was rubbish.
It was. It was. And you know, going into that game, I've just looked at my notes. Burnley going into that game had lost 9 out of 10, and they beat us. I've said it's arguably the worst display since we won promotion.
Oh dear,
it was awful.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm laughing, but it's the fact that you said they'd lost 9 out of 10 and they come to Highfield Road and it's guaranteed a win, isn't it?
Yeah. So So things picked up a bit after that. Yeah, we had some good home results. We talked about Man United win, and we beat Brighton 2-0. Luton, I remember. We had the FA Cup where we played Worcester City,
and that was a struggle, if I remember. I know we
yeah,
beat them, but it was a struggle.
we went behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was interesting about the gate, about the ground that day? Do you remember?
Oh no, I don't. Tell me.
The wind. We had gales the day before, and the roof of the sky blue stand blew off.
Of
Or
course.
it
Yeah.
was deemed dangerous anyway.
It's
So
all falling apart, wasn't it?
it was falling apart at the seams. But yeah, we scraped home against them 3-1, and got drawn against Norwich in the next round at home. We were 2-0 up.
Yeah.
Gary Thompson, Harry Roberts got his second ever goal after scoring in the 3-0 win at West Ham earlier that season.
Yeah, there's those T-shirts, wasn't it? I saw Harry score.
Yeah, and Norwich scored 2 goals in the last 20 minutes to take us back to Carrow Road. Aga Haridi scored.
Yeah.
And Mark Barham.
But wasn't there? I was thinking, is that the game where it was actually an own goal? Their second goal, wasn't it deflected in? Was it after extra time?
No, at Carrow Road. Yeah. Play
because Gary Thompson got sent off, didn't he? Is that the game he got sent off in?
He did. We were a goal up after 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Katie scored. Keith Birchin equalised. Gary went to extra time. Gary Thompson sent off.
Yeah.
The 95th minute.
Yeah.
For a foul on Greg Downs. And then Harry Roberts scored in his own net. Although to this day, Harry says that Barham handled it.
Oh, right. We travelled from Bubbenhall, and a friend of ours, Capri. I was in the back with my dad. It was the guy driving was driving like the wind. I've never known anything like it. It was the worst journey ever, and the quickest. And it was just a miserable night. Yeah, after taking the lead after 3 minutes, you just thought, "Oh, we can win this."
Yeah.
Not that we used to do well at Norwich anyway, because we never really did.
No,
so, and what happened was just the inevitable, wasn't it? It's just very typical City. We sort of,
and what looks like a reasonably easy home tie ends up with a replay and defeat. It is. It's classic Coventry.
Because in those days, Norwich rarely got a point or anything at Highfield Road. It was I always thought guaranteed win this. Norwich are turning up.
Yeah.
So the fact that we were winning 2-0 in the first game was just like, well, that's normal.
Yeah.
And then we go and mess it up, basically. So,
and at the time, we were 5th in the table, and they were 20th.
Yeah, we had a great home record at the time as well.
We did.
Yeah.
So that defeat, obviously, there's no more FA Cup money coming in, and Jimmy Hill acted and sold Gary Thompson over Dave Sexton's head, and the house of cards collapsed.
Yeah, very much so.
I think we heard from Gary, didn't we, a few weeks ago, that he didn't want to go.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hill said he had to go to Albion, and the impact at Brighton, I suspect, was just terrible. I'm sure Dave Sexton, even though he was a very professional guy, just thought, "What am I doing?" We've got a squad of 14 players.
Yeah.
Anybody gets injured, we're doomed. But having said that, they were fifth in the table. I think, just looking at the timeline, the Norwich game was 29th, sorry, 2nd of February. On the 12th of February, so 10 days later, we beat Man City 4-0.
That was in Italy, I think.
That was Gary's last game. And that took us, to fifth in the table. You know, we're looking at European place, UEFA Cup spot. And then,
and I went to the next game.
Yeah.
I know what happened at Notts County away.
Yeah.
Absolutely shocking. 5-1 defeat.
Yeah. That was on top of the 5-1 defeat at Highfield Road the previous season from County, wasn't it?
I know. Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. But you're right. It's almost like they're down tools, aren't they? Immediately.
Yeah. And you know, they went 13 games and got 3 points from the day that Gary left the club.
Yeah, it was a talismanic figure, wasn't he? He was. I mean, of course, we had Mark Haitley, but for me, Gary was the man. I think he drove the forward line. He was,
a
big fans' favourite and a big favourite amongst the players as well.
Yeah. And you know what Jimmy said why they sold him? Because him and Mark Haitley couldn't get on the field.
Right.
They didn't complement each other, which I think is ridiculous. Yeah, it was all about money. It was all about money.
Well, it's was it with the Washington Diplomats he'd lost the money with? I think.
I think he lost money with Detroit Express, and then he moved the franchise to Washington, and that didn't work. They lost money then too.
What? Just touching on the American football scene at the time, which was weird because there were so many players in the English league were playing. I didn't realise how many there were. I was looking at this the other day, and they wouldn't come back until the season already started.
Yeah,
it was a bizarre situation where we had quite a few players missing sometimes, and some clubs were worse than us where they had big players who weren't there for the first 2 or 3 matches of the season because they were still in America. What a scenario.
Yeah, Tommy Hutch was one of them. I think he was playing for Seattle in 1980, and he didn't come back till the middle of September.
It's a bizarre situation. I didn't realise at the time. We just thought, they're playing America. It's only when I look back in the record books thinking, this is ridiculous. I can see why Cloughy didn't want to. Well, when he signed Francis, he didn't want to sign him because he didn't want him to go into America. Whereas obviously Jimmy was saying you can go and play in America.
Yeah,
but I think Francis got his own way in the end.
He did. He did play for the Detroit Express.
Yeah. And I don't think Cloughy ever forgave him because he didn't treat him very well the entire time he was there.
No.
So it's just strange that was allowed to happen.
Yeah, it was. Have a look at some of those games that those 13 games. You mentioned Notts County; they lost 5-1. The home form plummeted. They lost 1-0 to Watford at home. They drew with Spurs 1-1. They lost to Forest 2-1. They drew with Liverpool.
They won the league that year, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, Liverpool was 17 points clear at the time, and we got a draw with them.
Yeah, I mean, we lost to Watford at home, but I think Watford finished second that season, didn't they? That's the first season up with Graham Taylor. They were flying, weren't they?
Yeah. They lost to Birmingham at home 1-0, and I said in my little report, Birmingham are the worst side in the league, but gained their first away win against woeful City. It's a depressing game, and near the end, a fan on the pitch throws down his shirt in disgust.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
He went to the centre of the pitch, didn't he? Did he go to the middle of the pitch? I'm sure he did.
Yeah. And the
Yes, I
people
do remember that.
had placards, didn't they?
Oh, well, we had Hill out. I can
Yeah,
remember it. I
yeah,
know this sounds weird because he was like the messiah in the 60s, but he completely lost it with the fans towards the back end.
yes,
And it was just unraveling at such a rate, wasn't it? His
yeah,
popularity from being such the main man.
yeah. They Blues were 21st in the table when we played them, so they beat us. Then the next home game, sorry, the next game we went to Brighton, who were 21st.
They beat us.
They beat us. They were in the cup final as well. You think they'd be taking their foot off the pedal? Steve Jacobs got sent off that day. Were you there?
For the Brighton one.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't, not for the Brighton one.
He was in a punch up with Chris Ramsey.
Right.
They both got sent off. And Brighton's best player was a lad called Gary Howlett.
Yeah.
Who'd been on City's books, never made the first team, a young Irish lad, and he became he was the star man for Brighton that day. Then they lost at home to West Brom, and things are beginning to look a bit desperate. We're down to 16th now, beginning to look over our shoulder. And Jimmy Hill said that he would stand down if someone wanted to put capital into the club.
Yeah.
And the rumours started to circulate that there were 8 first teamers who hadn't signed a new contract and could effectively leave at the end of the season, not for free like these days. Get a fee for them, but if they didn't want to sign, you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, and some of the players, it was tragic. I mean, Gary Gillespie went to Liverpool and sat on the he sat in the reserve for 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he'd have been for nowadays. He'd have gone and probably been loaned back for a season or something. But they used to do in the Liverpool way in those days, didn't they? And they used to stick them in the reserves and learn the trade basically with Liverpool before he got in.
Yeah.
But I've ticked some names here that didn't make it to the following season. You got Seeley, Gillespie, Dyson, Thomas, Francis, Witten, Haitley, obviously Thompson, Jim Melrose. That's your first team.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The whole eight of the 11 went.
Yeah.
But before that, they had the after the West Brom game, they were down to 16th. They went to Everton, and I put in my notes that they only had one shot on goal, and they lost to a late penalty. They lost to so many late goals at that time. The ball bounced up and hit Butterworth on the arm, and the ref gave a penalty. But it was the lowest Everton Division 1 crowd ever, 12,900.
Well, there you go. When I talk about how bad the attendances were for Everton, about 12,000.
Yeah.
And they're building a stadium now, which probably hold about 60 odd thousand.
Yeah. I was there that day because I was living in Cheshire, and it was so depressing. You thought this side is never going to win another game and we're going to get relegated. It looked a certainty. Even more than 85, I think. It looked as though we were going down.
There's seven games we lost by 1 goal. It just which is the difference Gary Thompson probably would have made.
Yeah, I know. And that was a May bank holiday, Monday. That was, and I remember the weather it was like winter. I think we had a sleet storm at Goodison Park. Anyway, Jimmy Hill resigned that week.
Yeah.
Ian Jameson became the new chairman, and we travelled to Stoke. Desperate, absolutely desperate.
Needing something.
Stoke were having their best season for many years. They were, comfortably mid-table, and we went and won 3-0.
How?
Can you believe it?
How?
Well, maybe maybe it was the Jimmy Hill effect. Oh, Jimmy Hill's gone. We can start playing again. We'll save the club.
Yeah, because I noticed in I was looking through all the programs that year. He was very vocal at the start, but he hardly put any input into the program all season, where he used to do that quite regular in the past.
Yeah.
It was just Dave Sexton's notes. Was Dave Sexton still with the under-21s at the time as well?
Yes, he was.
You see, and this was the big pull, wasn't it? This was the whole thing where he'd got these young lads playing, and that's what we thought was a great thing, wasn't it? Playing this.
Well, you look at our squad that season. Danny Thomas was in the full England squad.
Yeah.
Danny, Gary Thompson, Mark Haitley were in the under-21 squad, which was the best in Europe. Steve Hunt was playing out of his skin at times, but other times not so good. But he was a top Division 1 playmaker, wasn't he? So it's hard to understand.
The likes of Jerry Daly was still playing, wasn't he? International football, I think.
The one thing that Stoke I do remember about that Stoke game, because a friend of mine, a guy I worked with, was an old schoolmate of Ian Butterworth,
right.
who came from Crewe, and I lived, not far from Crewe, and he got me. He said, "Oh, Ian Butterworth, I've organised for you to have a couple of tickets for the Stoke game." So I met Ian Butterworth outside the players' entrance before the game. What a nice young man. He was only 18, I think, at the time, but a really nice young man. And the man of the match at Stoke was John Hendry.
Right. Yeah.
Who barely had a look in under Sexton. He didn't get many games, but he picked him that day, and he had a blinder. He scored one, and he made the two others.
Yeah, because he was Scotland under-21s, wasn't he? Then I think.
Yeah.
He was. Yeah. I mean, he did well after he left us. That's for sure.
So I think we were. I don't think that game made us mathematically safe, but it obviously ended a 13-game run without a win. And I think the 3 went down that season. I think it left it so that there's a midweek game, I seem to remember, and somebody lost to Liverpool, and it sealed. I think it may have been Brighton or Swansea, lost at Liverpool, and it meant that City was safe because Man City had to play Luton on the final day.
Yeah, somebody had to go down, didn't they?
Yeah, one of them two had to go down, and it turned out to be Man City because you remember the David Pleat running on the pitch at Main Road.
Yeah, Raddy Antiche scoring the winner for Luton.
Was it?
Yeah, Raddy Antiche. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was unexpected because Luton weren't the best away from home.
No, but we diced with death, didn't we?
Yeah, well, that West Ham game. Now, did Tony Cottee score a hat trick in that game? We lost 4-2 the last game of the season.
Yeah, he didn't score a hat trick. He scored 2.
But that was his debut, was it, for West Ham?
He came off the bench.
Yeah, because I think, isn't he the player who scored the most goals against us? Because every time Tony Cottee played, he seemed to score against us.
Yeah, I think he's second to Ian Rush.
And I think Shearer's up there as well, isn't it? Yeah. I just felt like every time he played.
Yeah, he did.
And he looked so small, didn't he? It's not.
And he kept on scoring for Everton when he went there. You're right, he always scored. But yeah, they beat us 4-2 on the final day. And of course, before the game, everybody knew that Sexton had got the sack.
Yeah.
And that Bobby Gould was coming. I think it was even the headline in the Coventry Telegraph that day.
Yeah, well, there was a big buzz around the ground, wasn't there, that he was coming. We're kind of a bit excited, I think, to be honest. Everybody thought, because he'd done okay at Bristol Rovers, hadn't he? Yeah,
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Jimmy Hill going, meant change, and that's what the fans wanted at that time. They wanted change. So we had a new chairman, a new manager, and a new outlook to everything. But the club had a tour to Zimbabwe. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah.
An end of season tour, and all the so-called rebels had to go on the tour. You know, they had to fulfill their, requirements in Zimbabwe and play quite a few games. I seem to remember.
Yeah.
And I think it was a very unhappy tour because Bobby Gould was in charge, and the rebels, their minds were elsewhere. They were negotiating their exits. So should we run through the players who left?
Yeah. Well, I've got Les Seeley, obviously.
Yeah, well, he went to Luton for about 100,000.
Gary Gillespie.
Well, he lingered quite a while actually before he eventually went to Liverpool. I think he went for the biggest fee. It was over 300,000, which is a fair. I think Liverpool were quite fair about that.
I've got Paul Dyson.
He went to Stoke City. Yeah.
Danny Thomas.
He went to Tottenham for 250,000, which was a ridiculous price, really.
Yeah.
To me, he was the star of that team.
Was that a tribunal price? It must have been. I can't believe.
Yeah, probably.
I presume Joe Francis, did he retire?
I think he went to. I think he went because Bobby Gould came from Bristol Rovers, didn't he?
Yeah.
Did Jerry
player manager
go to Bristol Rovers as player manager?
Possibly, yeah. Because he was 31 when he was with us.
Yeah, and he was a crop, wasn't he?
Yeah. No, I've got a guy here, Derek Hall, which I said is on. I've got his autograph on the back of my shirt, and you say he's played one game for Coventry.
Yeah.
So
he played. Yeah, no, we talked about the thin squad. Well, there was a game at Birmingham, St Andrews, late September, and we had injury problems, and they had to give debuts to Derek Hall and Keith Thompson.
Yeah.
I think Gary was injured, and maybe Steve Hunt was injured, or Steve Hunt hadn't come back from America probably. So somebody else was, Mark Haitley, maybe Jerry Daly. No, Jerry Daly was injured. So Hall came in for Daly, and Keith Thompson came in for his brother, and they had their debuts at Blues, along with Jim Melrose made his debut that day.
It is a ridiculously. When I look at the ages, it's such a young squad. So Steve Whitten went, didn't he?
Yeah,
he could shoot, couldn't he? He had a hell of a shot.
Yeah,
real thunderbolt, Steve Whitten. And he always had trouble with his weight, didn't he? He always seemed to be like he'd need to lose a stone.
Yeah,
I think he liked his fish and chips and pies. I think that was his problem. And whenever he got injured, he came back even heavier. But was he a West Ham boy anyway? He's from that.
He was. He was. We had a lot of lads from the East End because Les Seeley obviously came from there, and Steve Jacobs did as well. And there was a lad called Nicky Phillips, who briefly played a bit early. He was in the same youth team as Haitley and Thomas and all that. And he was from the East End. Yeah, we must have had a good scout down there.
Yeah, definitely. Mark Haitley, of course, he left.
Yeah.
Was that to Portsmouth?
Well, that was an interesting one because Portsmouth got him Portsmouth's second division side, they signed him for, I think, either 80 or 100,000, and he was a England under-21 international, for Christ's sake. And they sold him for a massive amount the following summer to Milan.
£1 million, wasn't it? £1 million.
I just looked up Jerry Francis, and he became player manager for Exeter immediately. Yeah.
I thought he'd gone player manager somewhere. With Mark Hateley, I think he even went to Portsmouth and probably doubled his money as well. They were paying all sorts of fees at the time, weren't they?
Yes.
And obviously, years later they went completely bankrupt. But there you go. But and of course he went to AC Milan, where they called him Attila, didn't they?
Yeah.
That was.
Well, I think a year after leaving Coventry, didn't he score against Brazil in the Maracanã?
Yeah, it's the same game as John Barnes scored that wonder goal, didn't he?
Yeah.
John Barnes did a Brazilian against Brazil, basically.
Yeah. So Hateley went from, Portsmouth to the Maracanã.
Yeah, his goal gets forgotten because of John Barnes' super goal, basically. It was an astonishing performance that night. And of course, he went on to Rangers. I mean, he became a big star at Portsmouth, Milan, and Rangers. It was huge. But so we let him go for pitch. We must have been so desperate for cash. Basically, we were just taking anything.
Yeah.
It was,
and I think even if the bids were derisory, the tribunal wasn't very good to us.
Right.
So as I said, I think Liverpool were very fair about Gillespie. I think they paid the market price for Gillespie. I think it's probably worth that. But
which suggests there was interest from other clubs as well. Then, so they had to.
Maybe, yeah.
He was a marquee player, wasn't he, Gary Gillespie?
He was. He was.
Of course, Gary went during the season, which was back. Was that 350 or 250?
I think it was 225 to West Brom. Yeah, which is, when buying clubs know you've got financial problems, they take advantage, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you look as well. Like Gary was 22. I mean, let's see, he was only 25. He wasn't that old.
No,
He'd been at the club that long. You just thought he was that old.
Yeah.
Dyson was 23. Danny Thomas was 21. You've got Steve Whitten 22, Mark Hateley 21, Gary Thompson 23. Yeah, it's what a waste, really. We had it all there and had to rebuild again. Jim Melrose, he went as well. Where did he go?
He eventually ended up at Celtic, didn't he?
Yeah.
And let me just check.
That's.
Yeah, he ended up at Celtic, but
the problem was it was a mass exodus, wasn't it? I mean, and then I look at what was left. so Bobby Gore, and we can talk more about this next week when we talk about the following season. But he was left with Perry Suckling, a 17-year-old goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Steve Jacobs, who was 21. Ian Butterworth, who was 19. Harry Roberts, 27. Peter Horman-Shook, who was 20. Martin Singleton, 19. Jerry Daly was still there. You tend to forget he played for Bobby Gould the following year. He was 29 by then.
Yeah.
John Hendry was there at the start. He was 19. Steve Hunt was still there, 26. So you forget that Steve Hunt was only 26.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Keith Thompson was 18. So basically, pretty much what you'd class now as if it was today, the under 23s.
Yeah.
It's like a reserve team, isn't it? We were left with.
Yeah. And I remember thinking that summer, what are we going to do? We need a complete team, because the previous season had only been 14 professionals. We lose 8 of them. It leaves you with 6. So Bobby Gould had I think he was just given a checkbook and told to get out and buy us a team. Jim Melrose did go to Celtic,
From us.
but he didn't last long there. He's back in England on loan at Wolves in '84, and then he went to Man City, won promotion with Man City back to the first division, and then he went to Charlton and he won promotion with them.
So he'd have played
in the division with Charlton.
He'd have played with David Phillips then, wouldn't he? If he got promoted.
Yeah, he must have done. Yeah, and it was Perry Suckling there as well as then. Perry Suckling.
That's cool, because David Phillips talks about that, because he came to us and the swap deal was Perry Suckling went to Man City.
Yeah,
that's I think we got the better deal, to be honest. There, I know Perry was a decent lad, but I think, and as an all-round footballer, David Phillips was a great signing.
Yes.
So when you look at that early 80s, then, because it was so much promise, when you think of the League Cup and everything, the semi-final, that was the season before, 80-81. Do you think it was all down to Jimmy Hill then losing his way a bit?
Yeah, you think back to that season and all those good young players being out of contract at the same time. You have to say, whoever was running the contracts, which has to be Jimmy, had let them run down, and were they players? You heard stories about players not even being offered a new contract. And I think Jimmy made comments about, these youngsters, they don't appreciate it. You don't tell young footballers that, do you?
No.
But then again, if you think about it, Gordon Milne had been general manager the year before. So was he culpable for the contract situation? He left, and I don't think there wasn't anybody took over that specific role for Coventry City.
Yeah, I don't think he really wanted the role.
No, he didn't. No. If you read his biography, he wanted to be working with players, and the Leicester opportunity was just too good to miss. And he went on to work. He went on to work as a coaching manager for many years in Turkey and at Leicester, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he's massively popular in Turkey. They absolutely love him out there, didn't they? There was, but it was a strange time, because I just thought, we got this. I mean, for me, because I was only a few years younger than some of these players, I thought it was fantastic. Like relatable almost.
Yeah.
And you kind of think it was just a shame, and I think it. We took a long time to recover as a club. Really, it's. I know we didn't get relegated, but in terms of the, you look at the club now, what we've got, what it seems to be building, it's almost like as if all of a sudden nowadays 10 players leave at the end of the season, your manager goes, and Doug King walks out.
Yeah.
Now what do you do? It's so deflating, and it's amazing that the support kept going, to be honest.
Yes.
What little there was.
Yeah. It really was a Jekyll and Hyde season, because, as I said, the first half of the season, the performances were just dazzling. Apart from the Burnley game, but they're beating Man United 3-0 at home. Yeah, that was just wonderful. That was probably our biggest ever win against them, wasn't it? And then, after the Norwich game and Gary going, it was just the worst half season ever. 13 games of doom.
Well, I was looking at this I've just counted. There's one. Oh, I count these now. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. In those 13 games, we scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 goals. Yeah, five goals. It was desperate, absolutely desperate.
Yeah,
and like I says, it was losing Gary Thompson. It was massive.
Yeah, they still had Haitley and Witten. and John Henry, Steve Hunt, Danny Thomas. You know, it was a good team. Just that.
Now, before we finish off the 82-83 season, just a brief chat about more recent stuff. Obviously, as in like 23-24 season coming up.
Yeah.
I'd say 24-25, isn't it?
24-25, yeah.
24-25. And of course, Adi Vivash is gone. A bit mysterious. No one really knows why. I mean, he's been tremendous, hasn't he, for the last 7 years? He's been part of the sort of like the Clough Taylor setup.
Yes, yeah, he has. He came in when Robins' first coach, Steve Taylor, had that brain incident, didn't he? A brain bleed or something like that, and had to step down. And Mark Robins brought in his ex-Walsall teammate, Adrian Vivash. And as you say, he's been a massive part of the furniture at Coventry City ever since. And you know, you look at his pedigree. He had a wonderful time with the Chelsea youth setup at various age levels, and obviously his contact book it must be amazing, you know. And he's brought so many ex Chelsea youth players to the club, hasn't he? Going right back to Dujon Sterling, you know, that must have been an AD connection on loan.
Villa's just signed one for 35 million. Ian Matson,
yeah.
You know, so but it's a bit. I don't know. It feels a bit. I kind of feel a bit sad for him because there's been no kind of really nice announcement. It was just like he's left, and I'm
very sad.
All under a cloud, you know. So, I mean, moving on from AD, obviously, are we after a number 2? That's the other thing. Nobody knows, because I imagine George Boateng and Reece Carr, they're coming as coaches, from what I gather.
Yeah. There's been no noises about a new assistant. You wonder whether Robins will miss AD. It must be strange for him. And how much of it is his decision? We don't know, do we?
No, which is odd. It's normally you get some sort of announcement, a proper announcement, but I don't think there really was. Also, as I think most people guessed, that Callum O'Hare wasn't going to re-sign. It's a shame, because purely because I'd like him to stay at the club, but I can fully understand why he'd want to move on, because, you know, if you're free, you're going to get a sign-on fee, you're going to get so much money, and you know, he's had a bad injury. Who knows? He's probably thinking, I may only get one shot. The thing is, we don't even know where he's going yet. So that's
no. And the other point about players leaving is that all footballers have got aspirations. And they're in this country, they aspire to play in the Premier League, and to play in the best league, you know, arguably the best league in the world, and hopefully win international caps and play in Europe. So you can't take that away from anybody, can you?
No. And if you look at Gustavo Hamer, okay, Sheffield United had a rotten season, but he was Player of the Year for Sheffield.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't. Whenever I watched him, he never looked out of place. I felt sorry for him because he spent most of the time defending, which isn't really a game. You know, that's which you kind of hope he might leave Sheffield and go for somewhere where they play, you know, at a Premier League club that has got more chance of staying up, basically.
Yes, well, I think there's a lot of time left in the transfer window, isn't there? And we saw a flurry, didn't we, on the run up to the 30th of June, where the clubs who have got FFP or whatever they call it, PSR problems, had to make had to sell players, but I think you'll see a lot of movement this summer. There's some silly money being splashed around. I see Kilman's gone from Wolves to West Ham, 40 million.
Yeah, yeah.
For well, in my opinion, a very average centre half.
It's not. I actually think 35 million is almost like the starting point now for a Premier League player, regardless of how good they are.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to make sense. And they keep saying how there's not enough money. Well, they keep spending it. I mean, I don't know how they can.
No, and they want to make more and more money. You know, the number of clubs who have put their season ticket prices up, and are being so intransigent with the EFL about giving the EFL more money from the television deal. It's just greed, to my mind. It's just greed.
Yeah, and I think the difference between when the Premier League started with Sky to now is with the money going down to the Championship is it's off the scale. I think the difference was 3 million in the early days, and now it's 3 billion. You know, it's not sustainable, is it, for the clubs, the other 72? I'm amazed there haven't been more clubs that have just fallen away completely, to be honest. Trying to keep up with the rest.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean in the lower divisions?
Yeah, in the lower divisions. Well, look at even the ones in the Championship, like Leeds. I mean, they had the one guy, I can't remember his name. They cost him 45 million, and I think he played 7 minutes, but they still pay his contract.
The German chap, yes.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah, he took them to court, and then the Leeds weren't going to pay the club, were they?
Yeah.
Because the deal was that they would sign him if they got promotion, and when they got promotion, they didn't want him.
Yeah.
They tried to wriggle out of the deal, but the German club took them to court, and it's cost them something like 70 or 80 million in wages and transfer fee.
It's just absolutely ridiculous. It really is absolutely ridiculous. So,
okay.
Well, finally, obviously, we got semi-finals this week. Now, this will probably go out. Well, it will definitely go out before the England game, I think, maybe. But what do you think then for the two semi-finals, France, Spain?
I like France's team, but they are desperately short of a striker.
Yeah.
Was Griezmann injured for their quarterfinal?
I'm not sure actually.
Because to me, he's there along with Mbappe. He's their best player,
Yeah.
but they need somebody to score goals. They need Giroud or somebody like that. I think Giroud's not in the squad, but that's the sort of player they need, because Lilian Thuram's son is not very good up front.
To be honest, you might as well better off playing Lilian Thuram.
Yeah.
I think Spain will sneak. It'll be a tight game.
Yeah, and Spain have got a lot of talent. Those wingers, I think, are really good.
Would Mark Robins play a 16-year-old?
Yeah, I know.
Amazing. You know what I mean? That's incredible. Yeah. And of course, England and Netherlands. Now, this is, I think, the hardest game England have faced,
without doubt.
And I know they're through to the semi-final. I don't like Southgate's brand of football, and end of story. I'm not a fan of it at all.
No.
If Mark Robins ever left, I wouldn't want Southgate as our manager. Simple as that.
No.
I just think with the pedigree of the squad, they could do it in a more entertaining, more energetic way. I don't know. But still, they're in the semi-final. They are. Game. What do you think?
Unless they raise their game a lot, they're going to go out. I think our defence, we've got the talent in midfield, and to an extent up front, but I've got question marks about a couple of our defenders, and there's so many good defenders at this tournament. You know, the French lads and the Spanish lads are really good defenders. And Portugal, Pepe at 39, what a player.
Oh, it's
A
ridiculous.
real warrior, isn't he?
Yeah, I just think maybe in general then, with like the English football, the setup, we haven't got enough defenders playing for the big teams in those key positions, basically.
Yeah.
We've only got a handful. You need more than a handful, for the squad. But they're muddling through, they're getting through, and who knows? It's
who knows?
I think it will go to penalties. I think it could be another long night, and it could go either way.
Penalties. I quite fancy our chances. I was impressed with our 5 against Switzerland. I thought they were very good penalties.
It was, yeah. So
it's been another pleasurable evening.
It has, yes.
Yes. So we talk next week. We can talk about the 83-4 season and the challenge that Bobby Gould had in putting a team on the pitch.
Yes.
Let alone building a squad.
And hopefully we might have a new kit and some new signings in our current squad.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, before we go, obviously, if you want to talk about any particular part of our Sky Blue history, keep forgetting to do this. Please email Jim at clarryborton@gmail.com. We've had quite a few now, actually. So Jim is going through them, aren't you, Jim? And we'll slowly go through them.
Yes. We will. We've got loads of ideas coming forward from listeners and watchers. So but please email me if you've got an idea.
Brilliant. Well, we'll be back next week. So,
okay. Thank you very much.
See you next week. Bye
bye.
Bye bye.
Radio Company of Business. Thank you very much.